Welcome, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday Night in the Word. Tonight, we are tackling the tough topic of debt. And what do I have right here? Oh, it's credit. 0% for 18 months. Sign me up.
Woo-hoo!
But this should turn into this.
Oh, your Coke, Russell.
That's okay. I'm not worried about the Coke. But I'm here joined with some great guests, some that we're all familiar with. So as we turn to Rikki, thank you for joining us tonight, as well as Michele, who everybody else is familiar with. And I want to open up with a question. Actually, let's review our Facebook question of the week, because it was quite nice that we had my wonderful favorite woman in the whole world comment back. The question of the week was, is it sinful to have a lifestyle of debt? Why or why not? And no, Michele is not allowed to speak on it because she's here tonight. And our next comment was from my wife, Jessica. The borrower is slave to the lender, Proverbs 22:7. And yes, it is going to be used tonight. So as we dive in, for those of you who are watching, I have a question I'd like for you to respond. This is a live Bible study. Be sure to engage with us. Ask us questions if you hear something that you want to know more about, and let us know what you think. So the question I want you guys to respond below to is, have you ever bought something that you regret? So throughout the night, I'll be checking and asking that question again, but let's jump on into debt. Rikki, let's tackle the tough topic.
Okay. Hello, folks. Now, in prepping for tonight, what I was really looking to do was to look at the spiritual side of debt. Debt is actually something that is marketed to us on a daily basis. It's part of our culture. We're just very saturated in it. But each one of us here tonight will share a little bit about just kind of how our minds kind of changed about that. What I'd first like to say is, in thinking about this, I was actually able to parallel debt with sin. And here's where I'm saying that. We don't know we need a solution until we realize it's a problem. And we don't know it's a problem until we realize how stuck we are. Throughout Scripture, sin is actually referenced as debt. The Bible actually talks about money quite a bit. And it was a very common analogy. It was one tool for Jesus to use in parables to just kind of describe just how much sin we were in. Luke 7:36-50 was the parable of the two debtors. That was when the sinful woman was washing Jesus' feet at dinner, and she was called out for it. But Jesus defended her and was like, hey, there were two debtors. One owed 50, another owed 500. Who do you think was more thankful? So that was one. The other is Matthew 18:21-35. The unmerciful servant was brought about by someone asking, how many times am I to forgive my brother? It goes into the story of the servant whose debts were forgiven. However, he went out and then found someone who owed him, and he was absolutely brutal to the guy and demanded repayment. And then the unmerciful servant ended up getting his in the end. So there's some parallels there, just how like debt is kind of referenced as, hey, this is, you know how when you're in debt, that's kind of what sin's like. So I'm going to refer to a quote that we all may have heard at some point. Jesus paid a debt he didn't owe because we owed a debt we couldn't pay. Not a verse, but if you turn to Hebrews 9:15, 9:15 says, for this reason, he is the mediator of the new covenant by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. That word redemption, to redeem by definition, is to gain or regain possession of something in exchange for payment. Matthew 20:28, this is a very popular verse. One I know I've heard frequently. just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. The word ransom, the definition of that is a sum of money or other payment demanded or paid for the release of a prisoner. 1 Corinthians 6:20 and 7:23 both state we were bought with a price. So that mentions it twice. I'll read you 7:23 because that in particular, you were bought at a price. Do not become slaves of men. That is kind of relevant to what I'm about to share now. I lead Financial Peace University, and in one of the sessions, there's a guy who's interviewed, and he states that nobody owns me anymore except him. And that really convicted me. That a debt lifestyle is a sin lifestyle. If I'm in debt to someone else, how can I live a life free to serve him, in him? This area of my life is tied up. Opportunity cost is saying to me, if my money is tied up in credit cards, if I owe someone else my money, it's not free to go to work elsewhere. I've overextended the resources I've been given. So at this point, I would like to just kind of ask Michele now, at what point were you convicted? What's kind of your story? What changed your mind about things?
My come to Jesus moment.
Your come to Jesus moment.
So some people already know this story. I think you included, because Financial Peace was part of that story. Over about 4 years ago. So I'm a police officer, but I don't wish to remain a police officer. And the problem that I found was that I made really good money, but I had backed myself into a corner with that money. Rikki had talked about living a sinful lifestyle. Debt is sin, and paralleling that to the world that we live in right now, the sinful ways of our nation, the sinful ways of our marketing, advertisements, all that kind of stuff. 2 short generations ago, It was a sin to owe anybody money. Yep. That you were not supposed to, like if you had a tab at the local hardware store, you were basically shamed for it every time you walked in that store, and people saw the list and you were shamed and down. And I'm not going to blame the boomer generation directly, but the Depression era generation was of the hoarding and you have to prepare for the future and all that kind of stuff. So they sort of lived this stifled lifestyle that they felt, that they deserved more out of the world and all that kind of stuff. So fast forward to the 70s, 80s, 90s, 80s, especially the credit boom, yes, where everybody started owing everything to everybody. We wanted to live that lavish lifestyle, but we didn't have the responsibility. We didn't have the instruction or the education to have that responsibility either. Mm-hmm. And so it sort of morphed into this. Now that's the regular way to go. When if you don't have responsibility over your finances, if you go to somebody for advice, even if you go to the bank, which is supposed to be the financial institution you're supposed to trust and all that kind of stuff, you go to the bank, what are they going to say if you need more money or if you're stuck in a financial position? Well, let's see if you qualify for that loan. Or they send you those 0% credit cards and try to lure you into all of that stuff. Yep. And think of some of the interest rates today, credit cards and all that kind of stuff. So when I talk about, I made really good money as a police officer. My husband works for the state. The two of us together made decent money. And when I started getting raises, I started buying new things. Mm-hmm. But I didn't buy them outright with cash. I started affording different and new monthly payments. Oh, I'm getting more per month, so I could spend more per month. Mm-hmm. So I got locked into a car early. I bought a house really early. I had lots of credit card debt. And over the years, as I maxed out what I was able to afford per month, what did I do? Did I get disciplined? Did I stop spending? No, I didn't. I went out and got a new loan to cover that one loan, to turn it into one payment instead of 10 payments. And then I was like, oh my gosh, all this money is freed up. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to get responsible and save it? No, I'm not. I'm going to spend it more on more debt. And that was just like the endless cycle that got me into a financial position when I was pregnant with my son 4 years ago. I was no longer eligible for overtime at work. And I would swear to this day that I didn't depend on my overtime to live. But when I went on light duty for maternity at my job, I overdrew my bank account 32 times that year. And do you think I went into the bank and asked them for forgiveness for any of that stuff? Nope. I paid every fee for that because I was too embarrassed to admit that I was a hot mess. And I told my husband, listen, I really don't want to go back on the road, but we have to get our finances in order for this to happen. So, like we prayed a little, and then, we stopped eating out like once or twice a week. But when I went back on the road, because I was fearful that I wasn't going to be able to pay those bills, I didn't want to go back on the road, but I got stuck. And I went back on the road for a couple of months, was able to catch up on all those bills, and I became pregnant with my daughter. I had to go back on light duty, not eligible for the overtime anymore. And luckily, that time around, we had reined in our finances enough that I didn't overdraw my bank account 32 times again. We were able to maintain it. But it was the status quo, like you said, when our money is stuck, when our lifestyle is stuck in this way where we're owing all these things to all these people, what are you doing for the glory of God? You don't have the freedom to be able to do that. I've always wanted to go on a mission. I've always wanted to do something, but then you think to yourself, oh, well, people in church, they don't make that much money. People in social work, they don't make that much money. How am I going to be able to pay my bill? Well, if I had no bills, I wouldn't have to pay all those bills.
Exactly.
So I could go and do that freely to be able to. So really, when I was pregnant with my daughter, my husband and I sat down. We're doing this. I'm not going back on the road after she's born. I have up to a year from her birth to be able to go back on the road, and I couldn't do it. The stress was too much. It was, our world has turned into a different world than when I first joined, law enforcement 16 years ago. And I couldn't look my son in the eye and say, oh yeah, I'm going to go put my life on the line and risk and all that stuff. So we prayed and I gave it to God is what it came down to. Is I said, I'm not fearful anymore because I know that you will provide for us. Please help us. And financial peace was announced at CBC, and we joined that. And then we started on this road to, listening to budget things and really being fruitful in our intentions with our money. And luckily, I still have a lot of debt to pay off, but I haven't used my credit card since the time that I was convicted. Since we started Financial Peace, I cut my credit card that first week in Financial Peace University. I have not used it since. And shockingly, we're not homeless. I didn't lose any of my cars. I still have a full belly, as you can see. So, God provides. And the most important thing to know is that you have to, in my perspective, from my experience, you have to give it to God. And you have to give all the resources that He has provided to you to Him for His glory. You can't expect to pay all these debts and all these things and owe all this stuff. And then at the very end, when you got like $5 left, then you're giving that to God. What does that do for His glory? What are you bringing to the world by only offering that, as a resource for anything? How are you supposed to help His people? How are you supposed to do any of that if you're stuck with all that stuff? So we're on the path. I was able to quit patrol. I took a $60,000 pay cut. And again, We're not homeless. I eat plenty. And we're still, I'm not walking to work or anything like that. We didn't have to get a horse, you know, to although a horse is probably expensive
They're
too.
way more expensive.
Probably way more expensive than a car.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, so it's you gotta give it to God. I mean, honestly, it's debt is sin. Debt is, and those get rich things. We live in a society of instant gratification.
Yeah.
There are so many people I know on that. I'm not even going to say it. All the cryptocurrency and they're gambling every single day with it. And that it's not a blessing in the end. It says it right. I mean, if you want to read some financial instruction, go to the book of Proverbs.
Right on.
There's so much good financial instruction in there, including several verses about get rich quick schemes and gambling your money, and even inheritances. Like, yes, it's responsible to leave an inheritance, but if you're not teaching the responsibility of what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be a steward of that money for the glory of God, then it's not a blessing to anyone who you leave it behind to either. Right. If they don't know how to manage it, our world is influential enough to be able to squander that money right away and again take the focus off of God. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Right on. Thanks for sharing.
Sorry guys, I was just checking my Robinhood account. Sorry. So Rikki, what I hear us talking about is debt, and before I get to my story, I just want to let everybody know that are we going to get into tithing and stewardship tonight, Rikki? Is that tonight's focus?
We may not.
Oh man, there's so many people that just tuned out because they really want us to get on that hot button topic.
Do they really?
Yeah, but we can't go there. So, but we do have some responses to our first question. Have you ever bought something you regret? And these are some very important answers that I got to read because I was one of them. But I'll get to mine last, so we'll go into my story. So the next one was Linda. At the beginning of the pandemic, she bought an online course so she could learn all about a subject matter. And then she never logged into the program. So just one way to waste money. There's this guy named Lee Better. He once bought a bicycle for his wife.
He sounds cute.
Yeah, he is so cute. But I guess I don't know what happened to that bicycle, but he regrets buying it, I guess. So.
Oh,
well, there just happens to be this fabulous bike path going in at the end of our street, and it has been waiting for that.
Waiting for that day. Okay, so
waiting
there's
for
hope.
the grand opening.
That's right.
There is hope yet for the indoor bike. But my story that I'll lead into was my wife and I, after we get married, she got into an accident with actually Christina over at the light just not far from here. And then that forced us to have to invest in a new car. And so we took that nice little insurance check and we're like, what can we get? And turns out we bought a new car and financed part of the car when in all reality, we should have just bought a car and not financed any part of it. So that was the first thing that I regret really buying when I know we could have done without. My story kind of begins with us really getting married. As Dave Ramsey will teach, there's a spender and there's a saver. I married a saver. And so
good for you.
Yes, good for me. But she's so much of a saver that even when you probably need to spend money, you save it. And so we actually got married and saw, we bought a house and figured we need to fill it, and we justified certain expensive items, and 0% we could pay off in a year. Oh, and then a year from then, that's our 1 year anniversary. We're going to go. We'll finance that trip too, and then we got to a point where like this is not sustainable. There are things we need to do to upkeep the house, things we want, but we're spending more than we're bringing in, so we need to budget. And I said, well, I know of this Christian guy. I've taken this financial peace class many years ago, didn't really apply it because didn't think it applied to me as a young 20-something. And now that I'm married and my wife is a saver and I'm a spender overall, I said, let's follow the Christian route. At least it's somebody who says they are Christian and they want to help people with finances. And so that's the way we went. And in the first week of financial peace, he says for the entire course, pick up all the slips you get for the next 8 weeks or however many weeks it is. Save all the credit card applications you get. And at the end of the period, open them up and count how much you're worth. And it was like millions of dollars that we could have gotten by opening up 0% credit cards in just that matter of weeks. It was just insane, the amount of debt people were just throwing at us. And that was fun. The cutting up the credit cards was fun. But knowing and tracking through the Every Dollar Budget app was really what helped my wife and I, because we went through it together, holding hands together, combining all of our resources together, holding each other accountable together. That started our journey to get out of debt. So, past the college loan debt, past the car debt, 2 car debts, past a mattress that we finance. Well, who finances a mattress? This guy. Because you know what? You spend 8 hours a day on a mattress. I wanted it to be good, so I had my way, and we financed it.
There's
stupid.
the justification.
There was my justification.
Justification.
So now we justify it after we've budgeted for it. So it set us up on a routine time. Usually our meetings go okay. Hot button topic. We won't talk about the last one, but it's hard. I mean, the top 2 reasons people get divorced are sex and money.
Yes.
So it's an important topic.
Yes.
Going back to what the Bible talks about, there's a reason why so many references that Jesus talks about in his parables reference material wealth. Where your treasure is, your heart will be also.
Yes.
Done. We can drop the mic, walk away, because that's where you put your money first is what you're going to honor God with. Just an overall statement. God owns it all. So he asks us to do wise with it, but
yes.
That's what we're trying to do. So we're still in process. I'm sure we'll get into good debt or bad debt. I hope. Is that something we're going to get into a little bit later?
Well, that's kind of like saying good sin and bad sin. What's acceptable sin? What's not acceptable sin? Sin is sin to God. Debt is debt. You owe someone, you got to pay it back. Even the modern world agrees that if you're signing the dotted line, you are agreeing to pay something back. You still owe. So I guess my question to you would be, what are you thinking about good debt versus bad debt?
I'm thinking
define.
I often justify this in my own world, such as appreciating values, such as a home should appreciate over time. So therefore taking out and borrowing somebody else's resources that I'm trusted with to then make more valuable over time a product, which is a home. Most cases they go up. So that would be oftentimes, I think most people watching might even agree that that's an appreciable item is an investment more so than a debt, even though you owe somebody. So in one respect, to me, it's kind of a flat line. It's wise to invest your money in something that's going to bring interest and value.
Sure.
Others would say if it's going to depreciate over time and not bring value, such as a car, I'm not even going to get into art. That's just too subjective. But I think that's the most common argument is, well, how do I afford a house if I can't buy it outright? It's a nice big world we'd love to live in, but it doesn't exist. That's utopia. We can't just go buy a house with cash every day. So that is what I think when I think of good debt. And bad debt, I justify it by a mortgage.
Okay. All right. Well, how do you feel about sending your kid to college? Winston is how old right now?
3.
Do you plan on...
No.
And tell me how.
What was the question? Do I plan on sending him to college?
Well, no I mean, but, you don't plan on sending him to college?
Do I plan on saving for his college? Probably not until after my guaranteed retirement is in place. Okay.
Okay, so my question would be, let's say in about 10 years, he'd be in high school or getting towards that. You guys, I know, I'm sorry, not to fast forward, but not to accelerate your life or anything. But when you and Jess get to the point where, you're discussing college with Winston or further education, maybe a trade school, whatever, you know, are you going to finance that or are you going to...
No, I will take him to the recruiter's office.
Okay. Well, there's that as well. But I guess regardless is what I'm saying, you know now that eventually, by the grace of God, that Winston is going to have a direction beyond high school. You're planning for that now. Why can't we also at a young age be like, hey, eventually I'm going to have to move out of mom and dad's house. I can start putting away for that now, and learn how to put away towards a goal, you know? And sure, ideally, buy within your means, buy cash, but if you can't, put as much towards it as possible, and then pay the crap out of it until it's done, you know, like as little time as possible. Just because you take out a 15-year mortgage doesn't mean you have to take 15 years to pay it off, you know, that type of thing. So now I'm sitting here speaking from a position of, yes, I have a mortgage, you know, did everything wrong. I worked at a bank. I got out because of exactly what Michele said earlier, but did everything wrong. And definitely am paying for it, literally. And yeah, there's definitely ways I would have approached that differently. So,
well, to your point, Michele made a great point about generational differences and how they view debt. It's a different view, and different families see things different ways. But I know my in-laws, they're probably going to die in that house. So I may or may not have to pay for senior living or senior care for them if they haven't planned it themselves, but they may be living with me or something in the future. But that's something that's traditional that we don't really see a lot of anymore. And I would love to be able to help my son right now, maybe other children later, to buy a house. I would love to be able to provide everything possible for them so that they don't have to experience debt. I know people in my family who outright paid for their kids to go to college, expensive colleges. And I'm like, good for them. I want to be able to do that for my son. So I think we hopefully will get there, but the importance of talking to your family and children about debt is severely important. And I think it's a huge thing. Even finances in general aren't even talked about at a young age. And so, and good stewardship was, stewardship, we're not going there. It was modeled for me at a young age, but I didn't know how to apply it. And then it kind of tethered off and I never picked it back up until I got married. That was a big gap in there because I got married late, according to most of my friends. So yes, please pick us up where you want to go.
Well, the problem, you say talk to people, talk to your family, talk to your kids. The problem is that people, especially with the generational differences and stuff like that, that finances are private. And if you're not having that conversation with them to be able to be the influencer, you know what I mean? When you talk about, there's so many topics we could talk about with being the influencer and stuff. But if everything is a taboo subject and you're not talking about it and you're not applying it in a godly way or in a biblical way or in a responsible financial way to be able to build for freedom and for your future to bring glory to God, guess who's talking to them? The world, the commercials, the advertisements, the social media, the media, everybody, all the big cars, all the big everything. So if you're not having those conversations, you can expect that things are going to go very wrong. Yeah, they are. I mean, the world is just, they're, you know, don't get me started on capitalism and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not trying to, but what I mean is,
let's go to capitalism.
We take that.
Not prepared for that.
It's been taken to such an extreme, really, that we don't know what we're doing, and we're being taught by the banks, by the credit industry, by, you know, all the manufacturers who are trying to make a buck off, and not only make a buck off of what you're purchasing or what you're financing through them, but also off the interest, you know, through the financing of all that stuff. So you think you're paying, you know, what is it with a house? You pay $200,000 for a house, but over 30 years of compounded interest, that's compounded daily, because if it were really 2% interest on a $100,000 house, it would be $102,000 that you're paying, but you're not. On $100,000,
take a deep breath, because this number gonna get big.
It's like $350,000 that you're paying by the end of those 30 years. Do you really want to be given all that money? And again, I'm in a lot of debt, but you know, Rikki and I have had our come to Jesus moment. And we realize how much this type of responsibility can change lives. So we changed careers to change other people's lives. And it starts with God. It really does. It starts with God. Like, financial peace was the first step. Actually, praying to God for the help was the first step. And then
Yes.
he lined up all those boats to help me not drown.
Yes.
Help me stop drowning. So,
Amen.
mhm.
Yeah. So, so I think it's appropriate to turn back to scripture at this point then. Because I mean, yeah, I've given my take on things, but yeah, what is the Bible saying about it? As Christians, do we truly seek God for our daily bread? Has he not promised he would supply all our needs? In Philippians 4:19, and my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. Have we just not figured out the difference between needs and wants? James 4:2 through 3, 2 and 3. You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. Sounds like prayer. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. So if we're not daily getting into his word, not daily seeking his will for our lives, not daily seeking the heart and mind of God, do we even know what to ask for? Do we even know what our needs are that he's willing to provide for us, or are we just like saying, God, I want this, because then I can live a happy life, and does that get us into a world of hurt, a world of debt, Are we stepping forward without seeking God? Are we not planning? Am I indulging myself today, putting off payment till tomorrow, and actually dipping into future provision? Proverbs, like you said, is an amazing book for all of this. 21:17 says, he who loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. So basically, are you just like using up all your stores? When I first really read through the Bible as a teenager, I didn't know much about loans and mortgages or debt or the value of money even, just that the numbers all seemed so big and loans so complicated. The only thing I knew about interest was that I was interested in Lee Vedder. And
look where that got you.
Now I'm going to read Proverbs 22, 26, and 27 because that was something I came across when I was first reading through the Bible. Do not be one of those who shakes hands in a pledge, one of those who is surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should he take away your bed from under you, your mattress, Russell, that you financed from
don't
under
take
you?
him a mattress,
How
y'all.
about that? But when I first read that, I thought that was out of date and no longer applicable in today's world. And like you had said about the generation, just like previous to ours, I thought that was out of date. It had become so normalized. I thought everyone lived on credit. Didn't realize that with proper steps, a bit of self-discipline, and a great work ethic, not to mention seeking God's desire for my life, it is actually possible to not become ensnared by debt. You can actually live at the speed of cash. That's a Dave Ramseyism. He then follows up with, if there's not enough cash, maybe that's God's way of saying no. I'll mention covetousness. That coveting is one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not covet. Or in modern terms, keeping up with the Joneses. Telling God what he has supplied isn't good enough. Not trusting his provision. Not managing the resources he has blessed us with well. Not seeking our heart's desires with him.
This makes me think about contentment and how important it is to be content with what God has given you.
Yes.
I think so often we're not content and we feel that we deserve more. And then we turn to our selfish desires rather than turning to God to say, hey, what is your plan for me? What is your plan to, help me provide? Analyzing really what he has blessed you with so that you could turn to the parable of the talents, and learn a whole lot, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And that's the one that really sticks out to a lot of people, and people don't really realize, what a talent was, you know, materially what it was. It wasn't an ability. It was material wealth. It was silver.
The love of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so contentment, the love of money, root of all evil. And it's not money, is evil.
Right.
It's the love of the money.
Correct.
And it puts the love of money, it puts the money before God. And that's where we get things backwards as a society.
Right.
Exactly.
Thinking that money will solve all our problems. Well, if we can just throw money at a problem, everything would just go away.
Right.
That's ultimately, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy of, uncontentment.
Right.
Money cannot fill the void that God can fill.
Right.
Yes,
Exactly. Russell, could you actually give me the definition of stewardship?
Ooh, the definition of stewardship.
Please.
Gee, I wonder why you asked. The definition of stewardship would be being responsible for something that's not yours. That is the bare bones based definition, which, as we Christians know, everything belongs to God. And so how we are managing that, we are being entrusted as stewards. We are acting as God's bank, so to speak. So that's my definition of stewardship.
Okay. Right on.
It's really funny. My mind immediately went to, oh, the money's not mine. It must belong to my debtor. And it's important to manage that money too, because you don't want to end up in foreclosure. You don't want to end up in collections and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that it doesn't happen and that you're a bad person if that does happen, but if you're not being responsible for what God gives you and you're just consuming it, basically. Consumer debt is when you're talking about drinking and the people who spend it on drinking and all that kind of stuff, not just drinking, but
oil,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're consuming it. That's consumer debt. What can you then give back for the glory of God if you're consuming that money, those materialistic things that you have? Not to say that you shouldn't enjoy buying a couple pillows if it makes you happy or whatever. But if you are, yes, if it's on clearance or if someone made it for you or whatever, you want to go out and make it. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't have to. Dave Ramsey talks about rice and beans, beans and rice and all that kind of stuff, responsibility.
Sure.
But then if you go to the extreme of being so focused on the budgeting and stressing over that and, looking at every dollar, every cent. Now, I know that's the purpose of the budgeting and everything like that, but the important thing is that you need to give it to God, that you're on this journey with God doing it, that you trust and are not fearful that He will provide for you. So that when He knows that your path is to bring glory to Him through your stewardship, that you will be blessed. And not to say that means that we're all going to be millionaires, although there's a good chance that if we stay on the plan and do the things that we're supposed to do. One of my coworkers who's really good with numbers or ex-coworkers really good with numbers and money, he said the fastest way to become a millionaire is to get rid of all your debt. And then he didn't tell me how to do that, but you did. Well, Dave Ramsey did, but you assisted in that. I didn't understand what exactly that meant. Oh, okay. Well, when I pay off my car and then the car, breaks, what am I going to do? I got to go get another car. But yeah, it's being responsible with it. Yep. One of the biggest challenges that I faced was the patience part of it. That the quick riches will only make you more of what you are. So if you're not happy, someone asked, I was listening to a podcast the other day. I listened to a lot of budget podcasts and stuff. And the one podcast I was listening to, the one guy said, what amount of money is enough? If you're always striving for that next best thing, for keeping up with the Joneses, is there any amount of money that would be enough that you'd finally get to that point where you're like, okay, now I'm happy. Now I'm content. But my experience with people who covet the materialistic things and equate success with big houses and big cars is that it never is enough. When they finally get that house, then they want the something else. And when they finally get that something else, then they want the something else.
Mm-hmm.
That if you don't find contentment in the things that you have that God has provided for you, the family that's around you, the blessings that he's bestowed upon you, if you don't find your contentment and your peace and your joy in that,
Mm-hmm.
no amount of money, no amount of stewardship, no amount of, well, stewardship maybe for God, not for the
Mhm.
debtors,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but no amount of materialistic things is going to make you happy. Money doesn't make you happy. Money buys things that can bring you some happiness, but not that peace and joy.
Right.
You know, might bring you a nice trip to the beach, to some island somewhere.
Stop. We're talking about debt.
I
So
know.
Oh my
budget
gosh.
for that trip.
But I'm
we'll
not.
all take one.
I was gonna say I'm not taking that trip
All
until that debt is paid.
It's always good to keep the end in view, though. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
hey, whatever gets
Gotta
you
have
there.
that vision.
But,
Yes.
but actually, it's interesting because when you were mentioning all of that, it's kind of like we like to say a lot when, oh, yeah, I got my paycheck, but it's already spent. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It kind of is already spent, whether we're in debt or not, because it's going to go towards like it. Like, are we really putting it towards God's use, you know? So,
The shocking statistics on how many people that live paycheck to paycheck
yes.
will blow your mind. Just Google that now, audience. Google how many people live paycheck to paycheck. It hurts
It's a
my heart to
staggering
think about
percentage.
that.
Yeah.
And from where we've come from generations and what's considered normal now.
Yeah.
The anxieties that we have, there are statistics out there you can Google too. How many people would not be able to pay important bills and be able to live with an emergency of just like $400.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, if they find themselves in an emergency, that they're maxing out their credit cards to pay for it because we're not being responsible with our paychecks. We're living paycheck to paycheck, but we're paying it to all these people who are exploiting us for our hard work. I've tried to turn my mind around to equate money for things to the amount of hours or amount of days of my life that is taken away from, you know, being a missionary to God or doing his work.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, like that $100 pair of shoes, you know, is 4 hours of my time, more than that if you factor in all the taxes and everything that we have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 hours of my time, that's four. So do I want to give 4 hours of my time that I could be giving to God to buy that pair of shoes?
Mm-hmm.
Or can I maybe, you know, find a different way to make that work? Find a different way to invest that $100
Mm-hmm.
to give me the freedom to be able to do what I want to joyfully give to God.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we have a live fact checker. Thank you, Mr. Lee Vetter. So he says 63%
Wow.
of Americans have been living paycheck to paycheck
I
since
was going
COVID
to say 64.
hit. And that's just,
Wow.
that's just since COVID hit. So thank you, Lee, for that
Mm.
statistic. I will throw
Thanks,
one out
Lee.
there that 80% of, Forbes says 78% live paycheck to paycheck. And that's probably a much longer term. That first
Yeah.
statistic was just since COVID.
Right.
So
Mhm.
I guess it's heading in a better direction, but I can tell you that 80%
Mm-hmm.
of people spend their tax refund before they get their tax refund, and that was the
Mhm.
statistics I just listened to yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's mind-boggling the amount of money. It's just basically screaming, "I'm not content with what you've given me, God, so I'm going to do it my way."
Mm-hmm.
So it's just
Yeah.
it blows my mind now, and I can't see myself reverting back to living the lifestyle that I was in
Mm-hmm.
of just spend and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see myself going that way. So
Yeah. There's actually verses on that. The Bible is clear that debt needs to be paid. Verses on, first of all, let me tell you what surety is, because surety is the word that's used quite often in the Bible. But the definition of surety
is
is
that charity?
surety.
Surety.
Like sure.
Oh,
T.
T.
Y.
It's a T.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
A person who takes responsibility for another's performance of an undertaking. For example, their appearing in court or the payment of a debt. Money given to support an undertaking that someone will perform a duty, pay their debts, etc. A guarantee. And these are all from Proverbs. I'll go ahead and read them. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger. That is Proverbs 6:1. And this is a long tirade. I won't go. You are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. So it's basically saying, work it off, pay it off.
It's at least 4 different places in Proverbs, actually, that it talks about not co-signing and being the surety for your friend's debt or your,
Yeah.
And I have fallen
And
victim.
family's debt, too.
I've fallen victim to that many times. I
Yes.
have.
You mentioned that too, family's debt. So like, what would you define that? Co-signing, right?
Yeah.
Or owing
Okay.
family.
Both.
Okay.
I mean, God doesn't really say you can co-sign for somebody's loan as long as they're your family. Unfortunately, no. But I will say that he will argue that you can give them money without expecting things in return. And now we're talking a different subject. Now we're talking the ultimate goal of stewardship, which is generosity. And we all want to give everything away after we've followed God's command to be good stewards. Yes, ultimate generosity. That is superior generosity. Is give everything that you possibly can away after you're being thoughtful and wise with your wealth.
Yes.
I was listening to Dave Ramsey's Straight Talk on Life and Money, and Anthony O'Neill was on there, and he actually said, when people come to me for loans, my the process that I follow, the instructions that I follow for myself is, if I couldn't just outright give it to them, if I can't afford to just give it to them, I'm not going to loan it to them, because you shouldn't expect that. It even says in the Bible, several times how, you're supposed to like forgive other people's debts against you, every 7 years. You're supposed to like bring it, save up your tithes for 3 years and give it away to the orphans and the widows and the foreigners that live in your land. And there's many, many places in the Bible that it talks about, giving and saving to be able to give, not to what's the word, that the hoarding, like not to hoard it. Doesn't Jesus talks about the parable, or is one of the parables where he, like, where that guy saves up all the grain and he saves it and saves it and saves it, and then he runs out of room to save the grain, so he says, you know what, I'm going to double my building, I'm going to build a bigger building and put more grain in it, and then he fills it all up, and God says, you're a fool. Like, now you're dead. You're going to die tomorrow. What are you going to do with all this stuff that you've saved up? The whole point is to be generous and giving.
Yeah, no, you got it. It was like, I'm going to work all my life to store up so I can live comfortably. And then they took it away. And actually, Proverbs even mentions this too. Do not overwork to be rich, because of your own understanding. Cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle towards heaven. So
which one is that, Proverbs?
That is Proverbs 23, 4 and 5. And I mean, like, I guess it's money is a tool to be wielded correctly.
Yes.
Like, don't love it, don't focus on gathering it, but also like, don't be a spendthrift either, so it's like so out of another thing you had mentioned earlier, and I feel it's important to touch on this because you were talking about the talents, and you mentioned maybe being a millionaire, maybe not. I think this is very important though too, because the talents talks about different levels of financial status, and that is huge, because it's like, okay, yeah, it's all about what are we doing with what we've been given. It's not like, well, if I'm not a millionaire, God's not going to be able to use me. That's not the message at all. God can use me just as well with oh my gosh, whatever he gifts me with, it's what am I doing with it? Luke 16, 9 through 13. Luke 16:10. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, money, who will commit to your trust the true riches? So God wants us to bring every area of our lives under his submission, including our finances.
Yes.
So that's the message.
We
here.
have a question, and
Yes.
I think it's actually a really good question because it's going to hit home for us. I think we can relate. But how can we be generous if we are crippled with debt? Is the question. So I just want to propose that to both of you guys and see, what do you think? How can we be generous if we are crippled with debt?
That's a good question. How can you?
Yeah.
There are many ways. Should I even go there?
I don't know where you're going to go, but I want to go there. So let's go there.
There are many ways to give to bring glory to God.
I'm excited. Let's go. We're going. We're going to a place that we need to go. This is good.
There are many ways to give to bring glory to God. It is unfortunate when a person finds themselves in a situation where they are stuck financially to be able to, like, if you want to give generously, but you can give generously from what you have, what you've stored. Even if you don't, I'm not talking like saving, stored, whatever, but we don't live in a very simpleton sort of lifestyle. There are lots of ways that you can give of the things that you already have, that you've already been blessed with. But my take on that is give first. Give and save first. And this is not a specific instruction. Please don't take this as like, this is like the broad instruction that everyone should. Everybody's situation is unique. Putting the disclaimer out there that if you would like some specific instruction, I'm available. Rikki is available for that sort of thing. But it has been my experience in my past, and many people that I've spoken with and heard testimonies, is that when you're focusing on the debt, and then you come to the end and you only have pennies to be able to give, that you will never find that blessing of generosity. And you'll never find yourself with the ability to do that, because you will always be so focused on the anxiety of the crippling debt, that if you give first, pay yourself first sorts of situations, I've always found that in those months that's what happens first. God provides right to the end. And then the following month, when you give first, he provides right to the end. There was a time where my husband and I were looking at our budget, and I'm saying the only wiggle room we have is our tithing, and is, our K-Love donation, and the other give. We have a portion on our budget that's other giving. So like if someone needs something, and they're stuck for money until next week or whatever, that we have that portion. But when we start scraping away at that, that's when we struggle to the end. That when we give first and we give joyfully, abundantly. What's the 2 Corinthians 9:7? That God loves a cheerful giver. That if you feel that you're giving out of obligation, or at the end of all the stressful anxiety of being in debt, that if you don't have that joy on your heart, whatever you give, importantly, the most important thing is that whatever you give, if you give it joyfully, God will multiply it. God will multiply what you give. It says in Luke 6:38, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure that you use, it will be measured to you. So if you're at the end and just giving that tiny inch because it's all that you can squeak out at the end of all the fruits of your irresponsibility, and I'm there too, but the fruits of of all the irresponsible decisions and the decisions where you weren't putting God first.
Right.
The most poor, I mean, the purpose of tithing, it says in Deuteronomy 14 that doing this will teach you to always put the fear of God first. Always put God first. If you put God first, your giving, your generosity to God for the glory of God first, you will be provided for.
Yep.
That's my experience.
Well,
Yeah.
I am so glad that I didn't have to say any of that. So, but Rikki, I want to hear what you have to say about, somebody who's wants to be generous, but they're crippled with debt. Can we hear your perspective?
Absolutely. What I'm going to say is prayer. Prayer is essential, because if you're crippled with debt, chances are, if you're calling yourself crippled with debt, you're aware that you want to make a change, that that something needs to change. Chances are God has convicted you of that. So go to God and spend some time talking to him in his word and let him speak to your heart. And let him guide you. Let him walk with you through this process. Just like in any other area of your life that you're trying to get back on track, he will bless you in that too. Money doesn't scare God. Debt doesn't scare God. And it's an invented thing, it's not bigger than him. Your debt is not bigger than God. So if this is an area you really want to turn around, seek his guidance, seek his direction. Again, there are resources, practical resources as well. Like, again, everyone around this table has had some experience with it. We're here to talk with you, pray with you, guide you confidentially. It'll be a safe place. Talk to the leaders, talk to your resources. And as far as generosity, let God work that in you as well. He'll show you. I also was on my journey to get out of debt. And in the midst of the thick of it, Lee and I do have to say, we were very open to being available for what we called random acts. So we've got a random acts budget item list. But sometimes there were just things that I'd see that it was like, you know what? I really feel like I need to bless this person in this area, like there's something that just seemed kind of off, and it's like, hey, I feel like I should step in here. And what do you know? God seems to have given me in my pocket exactly what I need to help this person. And that is where it's like, that's where the stewards come in. That is where, we're just the channel for God moving through us. And if he can do that in every other area of our life, why can he not do it through our financial area of our life too? So to those who want to be generous, yes, your heart is good. Don't squelch it. Seek God and ask him for opportunities. And meanwhile, just let this be an area that you're more diligent about, that you're working out of. And
I would also say that if you have an opportunity to give from the other blessings that God has bestowed upon you, then that is God sees that with favor too. That, in those months where a person's asking me, if a person asks me for money and I don't have the ability to be able to give them financially, I can help them with a household chore because I have my physical ability to be able to do that. I like getting out in the community and helping people clean up their yards and fix little like handiwork and stuff on their porches so that they can enjoy. Those are the types of things that I enjoy and I give joyfully to people. If a person, is struggling with household appliances and I can wash their clothes for them or something, that's something that is I'm still giving. I'm still being generous with my heart. And God sees that. It's not just about the money.
Right.
You know, and if we're able to give in that way, God will multiply that. And then those times where you find that you're short, he'll provide. You know, I don't even need to knock on wood. That was a whole
I
habit
saw-
I
yeah,
used
I
to
saw
do.
you
Knock
with
on wood is that if you just trust him,
Yep.
lay the fears aside when we talk about if I'm crippled with debt, and I'm crippled with debt, but I don't feel crippled by it because I know that God has me. And I know that in every opportunity, there's a lesson for me to learn. I'm not saying that I want to foreclose on my house or that I want to, you know, but there are lessons in all of those things. And if we focus on what God is trying to teach us and the patience that he is trying to teach us, especially the patience part, because that's where you're going to build the wealth.
Yes.
Is in the patient process. If we're looking for the quick way, there are plans out there that we can make sure that you can get rid of that debt quicker than you anticipate. But if there's a lesson that he needs to teach you in patience, in trusting him, that was, I think, you know, years. I've been a police officer for 16 years. And in that time, I've put in for promotions, for special assignments, for transfers to you know, different agencies and stuff. And I know now, looking back, although there was disappointment in the rejection of not receiving those things, I know that there was that better thing coming, because if I had taken that promotion, or I had taken that job, or I'd taken that transfer, I wouldn't be where I am now, seeking the path that God has put me on in order to be a missionary for him, a tool to use to glorify God.
Yeah.
Because I would have stayed. I would have stayed there. If I had taken that promotion, I would have stayed stuck there, because I would have felt that extra bit of obligation. Yeah, it really hurt at the time. And I thought, man, I really deserve this. Why, God, sort of thing. But why? because there was something better on the horizon.
Right on.
And it wasn't until I put my full faith in him. You can't toe the line with him.
Right.
You can't walk out the door but hold on to the handle. You have to break those chains. You have to let totally go. And you have to be ready. When you're ready, I will quote one of my business partners right now. She says, and I'm sure this is a quote from somewhere else, but when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that's what happened in my life, is when I full force gave all of my trials to God. And I said, I'm laying this at your altar, God. I am no longer afraid of what will happen if I don't have this job, if I don't get this promotion, if I don't have this paycheck. I'm no longer afraid of that, because I know you will carry me. No matter what happens, you're going to carry me through it. And I find that my anxiety starts to build the more I take my eyes off of him. And my anxiety and my fear, and then I start getting stressed out about money. And I find, and my husband he's a good grounder. When he sees me getting that way, and I will go to him and I say, I think I'm having a panic attack. I think I think I'm having an anxiety attack. I can't calm myself down. Literally, my body physically, I can't calm myself down. He says, go and pray. And it brings it back down. Nice. Because it's all in God.
Yeah.
It's in God.
As we kind of begin to wind down for the night, I want to give my file that you had mentioned something about, taking care of people's homes and serving them with time. Something that Linda also reminds us that a form of generosity is serving with time, which we have. I'm very thankful for that. We have a lot of people who serve with their time to take care of God's house, this actual house here that we are a part of. So thank you for all who do serve there as well. And my last comment about how to be generous when you're crippled with debt reminds me of the widow at the temple that Jesus talks about. She gave literally the 2 mites, which is the smallest Roman value you could possibly give. And what did she do first? She gave it to God. So just to your point,
yes,
there's value in Jesus's words there as well.
All those rich
Mhm.
people waited to the end and they gave out of their abundance. She gave first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are there any final comments that we want to wrap up with for tonight, Rikki?
Yeah, I've got a few. We've already covered, again, if this is an area you're struggling with, again, please talk to any of us.
Mhm.
Feel free to come up to us. We're happy to talk with you. And again, I know leadership also would be happy to, talk with you confidentially. Definitely that. I'd also like to just kind of like throw something out there that, just might kind of leave things a little bit hanging for a potential future discussion.
Okay.
I would like to propose that generosity and tithing are two different things. I just wanted to throw that out there. Food for thought. Again, a discussion for another night. But
should we have another night on tithing? I wonder, should that come up, guys? If you want to see another night talk about tithing, why don't you leave us a comment below, or send us an email, and then we'll or send the church an email. We'll address it then if you would be interested in having that as a topic here later.
So I close with this. Luke 12:22 through 32. This is Jesus speaking. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, nor about the body, what you will put on. Life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which have neither storehouse nor barn, and God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, and yet I say to you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothes the grass, which today is in the field and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Do not seek what you should eat or what you should drink, nor have an anxious mind. For all these things the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knows that you need these things. But seek the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you. Do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell what you have and give alms. Provide yourselves money bags which do not grow old, a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches nor moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also."
That was beautiful. I think that's a great place to end it. So, Michele, do you have any final thoughts too that you want to close with?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, just want to thank everybody for watching this episode. I want to thank Jade for being an awesome moderator when I haven't been able to be here. And as always, please like and subscribe if you found tonight's information helpful. Share it with your friends. We'd love to see you for next week's topic. It's going to be exciting too as we review some interesting book and movie that some people find controversial. So I'm excited to see what comes next week, but look forward to seeing you then. Until then, thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.